Episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is. I had the awesome pleasure of having a really fun conversation with Stacy Winsett, and she has really been through it, man. I know you're gonna love some of the stories she shares. Had some crazy experiences and just shared so much wisdom about how she got through things and really learned from things and different kind of phases in learning in her leadership journey. So, um, yeah, I think you're going to really like this one. Welcome aboard. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I get to have super fun conversations with real, live, real time leaders who've dealt with real crap and are willing to come talk to us authentically and openly about the hard lessons we've all learned. And today is no different. I'm so excited to have Stacy Winsett here. Stacy is the Chief People Officer at a transit company. Is that okay? Um, and you've had a lot of time in a lot of industries. Your current company is RATP Dev USA, and that is in Fort Worth, Texas, based.
Based in Fort Worth, correct.
Okay. But Stacy, you've had a really interesting career path, starting with airlines and almost always working in kind of industrial type companies. Started in ops and kind of transitioned over to your passion, which is the people, HR, talent, labor side. Um, you also, I would love for you to talk about your book that's coming out, but give us like a little bit of a feel for your current role and how you got there into this chief people officer position.
Sure. So I started out, as you said, in the airline industry and in the operations side of the house. And so I think, coming through operations, you have a need to work with HR constantly. And so I learned a lot in those first supervisory roles and manager roles. Ultimately ended up out at DFW Airport, probably the toughest job ever. The people that work out at the airports, man, we got to give them some love. It's a tough job, whether you're loading bags or offloading bags, or you're up there dealing with all of the passengers. But that's really where I found my love for people and labor. I'd always been a natural leader, but I recognized that I had this way of resolving conflict that others just didn't seem to have. And part of that, if you read the book, has to do with how I grew up and all the adversity that I grew up in. And so I became really good at conflict resolution and figuring a way, the best way to resolve things. And so that's how I found my love, and ultimately ended up in labor relations for American Airlines. I have some, wonderful memories and stories from the airline and things we learned there. But that really was my platform for, when I left. This would have been after 9/11 and all the kind of everything was stagnant in the airline. And I moved on to manufacturing and other industrial companies. And all of them, guess what, had a labor component. And so those are the type of companies that I chose. Those where I got to do something that I loved, which was that labor piece and being able to resolve conflict, make things better, build engagement, those type of things. So here we are, 30 years later, I can't believe it. And I'm working for this great company where, in fact, we were named one of America's favorite workplaces last year.
Oh, awesome.
So, and that's pretty exciting. We had been on this journey for about 4 years of engagement and reducing turnover. And as you can imagine, in the transit space, turnover is high. Transportation in general, it's high. And to be where we are now in really less than four full years, it's astonishing. And to be able to get that award, I'm so proud of our people.
Awesome. Awesome. So, you have been in a very male-dominated industries, and have had that eye for culture and interpersonal conflict and just under really like a passion for the people side. You and I geeked out on that. I think that's a similarity between both of us, right? Being in very high pressure senior leadership roles, but always keeping your eye on the people side and getting really good at that. And that's a differentiator. I think especially in the world of AI emerging, right? And a lot of jobs changing dramatically. If you have good leadership skills, good people skills, good emotional intelligence, you're always going to have a place in the world.
Right.
Um, so I'm wondering, you mentioned adversity, and I want you to mention your book right when I stop talking.
Mm.
Let's not forget that. And you and I
Mm.
have both been a little obsessed with adversity and how it's really shaped us. We've been incredibly resilient. We've become really resilient and strong because of all the adversity that we faced. What is an unexpectedly difficult thing that you went through when it came to the people side of things? Maybe even earlier in your leadership, where you just went, what the heck is happening, or why is this so hard? And what did you do to overcome it?
Sure. And I wish I could say that it happened once. I learned from it and right and it didn't ever happen again. Unfortunately, that's just not the way life is. I think it was learning learning unhealthy leaders, right? And not quite understanding that you immediately assume it's you, right? They don't like me because I'm not good enough, and it's imposter syndrome. We ought to automatically look at what are we doing wrong? Why does this person treat me the way they do? And that gosh, that started early in my career. I had many bouts with again in male dominated industries, and and part of it too is my personality style was very direct.
Hmm.
And yeah, that didn't always, that wasn't always accepted in that male dominated environment. And so over the years, I've dealt with unhealthy leaders. I've dealt with ones that were unethical, that asked me to do things that were completely unethical, and I had to make a choice and say, nope, that's not what I'm going to do, and I'm going to choose to leave.
Yeah.
There's been times where leaders have literally tried to destroy me, and I've let them. That's the sad thing. There's been times where they took my voice or I let them take my voice. And it's real easy. It happens before you even know it. And so since then I recognize the behavior and I recognize that, it's not me, it's actually you. It's, as the leader, it's you're the one that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And I think you start protecting yourself and realizing what you bring to the plate and who you are at the core,
Hmm.
and stop listening to all that noise. So
Hmm.
that's really like I said, but I wish I'd have learned it the first couple of times,
Yeah.
but we eventually got there.
It sounds like you've been in some kind of toxic environments
Oh, yeah,
in your
just
career.
me. That's not fair.
Let's just call it what it is. I always say, if you end up on the receiving side of a sociopath, it's going to be confusing if you're not a sociopath.
Right. Right.
We're not wired to think like that. And the only people that are them. And you're going to come across sociopaths in your life.
Right.
Hopefully, not that many. But unfortunately, there are some industries and sectors where it seems to breed really toxic leaders that everyone just lets them be that way, right? And that's not the majority. And so I think no one could have expected that. And then every time it hits you, you're like, what's happening? It just feels like an alternate reality.
And it happens often too because the most of the time they're very good at what they
Right.
do
Mm-hmm.
because right, maybe they're a bully and they push so hard that
Mm-hmm.
they get the results ultimately, and it's hard to argue with the results. And so it's really important to look at not just the what but the how
Mm-hmm.
of leadership. And in our company we actually do that. We really look at not just what our leaders are accomplishing, but how they're doing and what behaviors they're using, and make sure that aligns with our values.
Yeah. I love the HR policy. We no longer suffer brilliant assholes.
I
Okay?
love that.
Like, that's just a really hardcore, great motto. I think Netflix kind of came around to realizing you can be technically brilliant at your job, but you'll destroy the company if you're a jerk of a leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that just, it creates a culture where doing jerky, unhealthy things is the norm. It's part of the culture when you have the leaders doing it because everyone looks at the leaders' behaviors and says that's what's okay, right? So, and we talked about culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? Like it, and that's probably why you and I became passionate about the people side. We're goal oriented, results driven people who went, oh, it's culture. that's what's actually happening here that I got to figure out. So, can you give us an example from your experience where you had a cultural dynamic that was really unhealthy or unhelpful as you were trying to lead a high performing team?
Yes, and so this goes back to it was a leader that I supported. He happened to be a COO, which again, that's typical for HR. We support operations, but he made it impossible for me to be the leader that I knew I was because it was constant. It was this constant barrage. And no matter anything we were doing with my team, eventually it's going to rub off on your team. When you're getting, just beat up day after day after day, and people look at me and they're like, Stacy, you're so strong. I can't imagine. I'm like, no, I was in tears every day.
Mm,
And you can't lead effectively when you're not psychologically safe. You can't lead effectively. And so I spent a lot of time with after learning that, I spent a lot of time with my own teams, making sure that they have that psychological and safe space
mhm.
where we have code words. It's hysterical. I'm a DI on the disc scale, so I'm a driver. I like to drive fast and hard. And sometimes that can be misconstrued. And
Mhm.
and so I give them full permission to say, whoa,
Yeah,
hold on a minute,
totally.
right? You're about to go off a cliff. We're going too fast. I don't understand.
Hmm.
And that's so critical because I've been there. I've been in those situations where it wasn't safe. And again, the Berkman is a personality assessment that actually helped me understand who I was
Yeah,
in a normal situation and who I was under extreme stress where I wasn't getting my needs met. And I was
right.
like, oh, so that's the reason.
Yeah,
That's why when you're not getting your tank filled and you've got a barrage from a bully, right? You don't have anything left to give.
yeah.
And that's not healthy for the people.
Yeah. So, Google's Project Aristotle, I think it was, did a lot of research internally on this, on psychological safety, and realized the highest performing teams weren't the smartest or even the most
Right.
skilled. They were the teams that were the most psychologically safe. But what is the essence of that to you? What does that really mean to you to have
Yeah.
psychological safety?
Yeah. I want my people to be able to show up as who they are, right? I want their authentic selves. I want the good, the bad, the ugly, because that's how they're going to learn. I
Mm,
want them to feel comfortable when they've made a mistake. They come to me and I tell them, come to me immediately. We're going to fix it. We're going to solve it.
yeah,
We're going to learn from it. We're going to move on.
yeah,
And I reward them for that. I don't beat them over the head because they've made a mistake. We certainly talk about it. We learn from it. But again, they didn't mean to make the mistake. As long as they learn something from it and they don't keep repeating it, why are we going to sit and keep regurgitating that? Because that's not good for them. And they're already going to be so much harder on themselves. And I will say, my team, they feel so bad when they've disappointed me. So I already know. I
hmm,
don't need to add on top of that because we know when we've messed up. I mean, I had a mistake here recently with my own CEO. I was like, I can't believe I did that. And he handled it so beautifully. And he was like, yeah, let's learn from it. And I was like, yeah, that's what I do with my teams.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I was coaching a client of mine who there was a big mistake. It was like, $1 million mistake that
it's
was
a big,
made. And
it's a big.
he was really upset. And he was that guy that you don't give bad news to him because he will whip the messenger, right? So no one ever wanted to tell him anything. No one felt safe around him. And he and I were kind of processing this big error. And I was like, do you think they tried to make this mistake? Because that's how you're acting. You're acting
Yeah.
like it was intentional. He was like, I mean, not that they tried, but I think they just don't care. And I had to say, that is not true at all. They care deeply. People don't come into work going, how can I mess with Tom today?
Right.
Like they're trying their best. And it's, unless they're a sociopath, which is
Right.
a
Right.
tiny fragment of the population. So you can assume that they're doing their best. And probably the responsibility is somewhat on you, CEO, that this mistake happened. There is something you missed. You have some kind of accountability here, so humble yourself, right?
And speaking of humbling, um, I make sure that they, when I've messed up, I tell them, y'all are
Yeah,
not going to believe what your boss did today, right?
exactly.
I stepped in it so big. Here's what happened. I was going too fast. Surprise, surprise. And here's what happened. And guess what? Here's what I learned from it.
Yeah.
So I'm holding myself accountable with you guys to let you know it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
And here's what we can all learn from my mistakes because
Yeah.
I've had plenty over the years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exactly. I learned, I think, pretty early as a leader, when someone makes a mistake, they're terrified. Like you said, they're going to be harder on themselves than you are. So I would
Waiting to
always
be
start the
fired.
conversation by saying, I have made this exact same mistake. Or
You know what
like it's,
I tell them, look, I've sent out an entire demographic file with pay to the entire organization before in my career. It can't get worse than that. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
yeah, yeah. And speaking of adversity, tell us about your book too, because it's just it sounds like you have really collected all of these insights, and then it's kind of a passion project for you.
Here you go. Here it is.
Ta-da!
So, from ashes to influence, leadership forged by fire and faith. Um, this book came about because I've had just colleagues and close friends that have said, Stacy, people need to hear your story. Because one, when I start telling them a little snippets of my childhood and what I've been through from a leadership perspective, they're like, nobody would ever believe this. This could be a movie because they're like, you can't make this stuff up. And so finally, I got tired. They kept pushing me, and I was like, obviously, enough people are coming to me. It's not me bringing this up. They're coming to me and saying, Stacey, you need to do this. It's going to have an impact on people. And so I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and start writing. So that was July of last year. I wrote my first 6,000 words in July. And my career crazy, crazy busy. And so I didn't pick it back up until December, until I had some vacation time. And finished it in December. But the book is about both literally and figuratively about ashes. My mother, one of her many, many husbands, was a man associated with the mob. The mob. and and he was not a good guy. Right, there was lots of violence in my household. Luckily, I can laugh about it now. It wasn't very funny at the time. But he ultimately burned our home down.
Oh my gosh.
Right. He said, "Hey, if you ever leave me, I'm going to burn your house down." Well, guess what? He did. And so that's kind of where the literal ashes come from. But when you look back through from the moment I was born, premature, and all those challenges to everything I faced through childhood, I was on my own at age 15.
Mm.
My mother threw all my stuff out in the middle of the highway, and here I was on my own at 15. I had been the adult for so many years at that point that it was kind of like, okay, I guess we'll do this too. But so that was, all of those ashes. And then once you get into leadership, right, the adversity's not over, right? There was bad marriages, there was abusive marriages, there was, bad bosses, bully bosses or bully leaders. And so lots of ashes along the way. And in spite of that, I was able to lead, right? I learned many things over the space of time of how to lead properly, but I was still operating in that survival mode. My body had not shut off for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I got into a psychologically safe space to be able to recognize, okay, I'm over functioning, I'm going 24/7, right? I'm still carrying the load for everybody. And eventually that takes a toll. And so it's important, the book really helps people to understand how to move out of that adversity into that positive space, get out of that survival mode because it does impact your leadership. And no matter how hard you try to keep it for your team, they recognize when you're emotionally unbalanced or you're over functioning
Yeah.
and you're pushing them to do too much too.
Mm.
And so the book is really about moving into that stewardship, right? It's more about building that hope. I hope that they'll take the positive things from the book, recognize that you can live through anything, right? Read my stories, you can get through anything. And instead of always laugh and say, most people that go through the things like I've been through choose drugs and alcohol. And my sister and I, instead, we chose, unfortunately, overfunction,
Yeah.
right? We became the overachievers, not realizing. But if I can help one person back up and take some self-care and recognize when they're in that unsafe space and say, nope, that's not for me, and have the courage to get up and leave. You don't have to stay in that. And I stayed way too long, too many times.
Yeah, yeah. So, what you're describing is the essence of emotional intelligence, right? It's like bad things are going to happen, but I have faith that I can do this. And I'm learning something from this and being able to move forward, but do it with some self-love and self-care, not too much grit. That's just such a hard line to walk. So you have to have the self-awareness and self-management to be able to say, I know what's happening with me and I know who I am and I know how to manage my life. And we're not taught that, right?
No,
It's like,
no, you're
why don't,
rewarded. You're
yeah,
rewarded for something different. You're rewarded for the overfunctioning. You're always
yeah,
there. You make it happen. You're the capable one. And people never take the time to ask, what is the cost? What's really happening? And I will tell you what I do now is when I see one of my leaders that's working 24/7 through the weekends, um, and working the hours that I work, but I'm right, I still am bad about it. But that's my cue to start asking some questions. What's going on? Do I have too much on your plate? Why are you not taking care of yourself?
yeah, yeah. So, and there's plenty of research that shows that when we're over functioning, we're dysregulated and it makes us stupider, literally stupider, so that we have to put in more time to do something that we could have done in half the time. Once I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay, now I'm actually going to take care of myself because I'm just making everything harder than it needs to be. So, and in leadership, it's so important for us to be regulated and managed because if we're off and we're like revved up, everyone else around us revs up. And if we're calm, everyone else can stay much more chill. So emotional intelligence has been shown over and over by research to be the most important trait for a high performing leader. So, how do you think you've improved your emotional intelligence and your social skill? I know you were kind of thrust into forced to do it to some extent, but then you really had to take it to the next level of self-care and self-management and pulling out of grit. How were you able to develop that kind of self-awareness and self-management?
Luckily, along the way, from the airline to each company I went to, I luckily had processes for 360s, and I was
Okay.
able to get that feedback early on. And so I would do a decent job of adjusting my behavior. I recognized once I went through DISC and understood my personality style, I was like, oh, okay, that's how I'm a driver, and that's why how I'm coming across to those people. Um, but it wasn't though again until again I think I protected my folks for the most part, but once I got into that safe space, I really took a big step back and said, okay, we're going to now, we're going to regulate
Mhm.
inside, right? You can regulate on the outside, but I really wasn't regulating on the inside until I recognized the cost. And so now I think creating those healthy environments for your team, again, that holds me accountable because I tell them, if you see me doing X, I expect you to call me on it,
Mhm.
right? It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
And you have the safe space to say, hey, Stacy, you might need a vacation day, right? And we laugh about it because we know each other's personality styles. And again, it's all about, it reminds me of five behaviors of a team or five
Mhm.
dysfunctions of a team. We really operate in that space. I got all of my team members certified in five behaviors.
Oh, nice.
And so it's about keeping each other safe and healthy as well. It's not just about the work.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the saying, sometimes we realize that we were our own worst enemy in certain
Mhm.
circumstances, right? And I know that you have lived that and realized, oh my God, why am I beating myself up like this? Why am I staying in these bad situations? Why am I overextending myself, right? So, what is a key moment when you realized I have this trait or this habit that I really need to overcome? And what did you carry forward from that experience?
So I'm going to give you a personal one because I do think it does apply in business as well. Um, I stayed in a bad marriage, a really, really bad marriage for 8 years.
Mm.
And when I go back and dissect that, I realize I'm a fixer. Again, I grew up with all this adversity and I'm the one, the capable one. I just want to calm things down. And I truly thought I could fix this and calm this person down. And I didn't want to, my ego got in the way. My mother had been married so many times. I refused to be my mother. And so I stayed in that bad marriage for 8 years, an abusive marriage for 8 years, at that, because I didn't want to admit that I'd failed.
Mm.
Right. And I think from a business side and a leadership side, I stayed in companies too long as well, in situations that clearly were not healthy for me, and I should have made that choice sooner.
Mhm.
And but again, when you're right in the middle of it, it doesn't feel fair and right, and you justify and I was the breadwinner of the family, and so it makes it even tougher just to walk away. But but I think once you've been through that and you recover from that, you recognize now, the minute I start getting that anxiety, I step back and say, okay, why am I feeling this way? And am I rubbing myself up for no reason? Or let's look at this situation. Is this really an unhealthy situation? Or do I just need to talk to my leader to say, hey, this is how that made me feel.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. So, um, you've had some bad bosses, and I feel like in my career, I really learned a lot about leadership, not so much from the good ones, but the bad ones, and going,
Right.
oh man, I don't want to be like that because I know how it feels, right?
Yeah.
To be around that. So, what are a couple bad boss behaviors that you identified early? I will not do that. And do you think bad bosses are fixable?
Oh boy. That's a loaded question. I One of the things that I absolutely just detest, and you see this also with parenting as well. I I've been there where a bad leader wants to destroy you in front of people and just wants to make you squirm and just insult you in front of everyone. And I just refuse to do that with my team. I say, you take accountability for your team. I don't care what the mistake is. You take accountability in public and you coach in private.
Hmm.
And because you could completely destroy somebody's self-confidence in that one moment. And I've been there. Like I said, I literally had somebody take my voice before doing that very behavior. And so I just refuse to do that. And when I do recognize that maybe my directness might have been too much, I usually will recognize it and I'll go back and say, hey, I didn't mean for that to come across the way it did. I apologize if that hurt your feelings. And here's what I meant to say. But it's the same with parenting. You've seen parents that just are nasty to their kids in public,
Yeah,
right? Right. That you're impacting their self-esteem.
right.
And not to say that you can't correct your children. Obviously, there's a way to do that, but don't humiliate them in public.
Yeah, yeah. It's, a lot of leadership is like parenting. Like
Right? Yes.
kids are little
A
humans,
2-year-old.
and it's just there's things that just don't work on all humans, little ones and big ones. And I almost feel like a lot of people running companies are children wearing adult clothing, right,
Absolutely.
and adult bodies. Like we're still insecure and doubtful of ourselves, but we're all walking around like it's all right. I'm the boss. I know what to do. And on the inside, that is not the dialogue. And we need to remember that. Like people need to feel accepted and safe and supported in order to perform.
Exactly. And it's amazing what you get whenever you give them that safe space. They will leap mountains for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've come a long way, Stacey. I want to ask, um, people would probably look at you and go, she's at the pinnacle of her career and she's writing a book and speaking, right? Like, but I think that we're always growing.
Right.
And if we're not working on ourselves, then we're sliding backwards.
Mhm.
So, what do you feel is your next area of growth that will help you to be really optimally fulfilled, low stress, and have the kind of influence that you want in the world around you on a daily basis?
Right. I'm a lifelong learner, so this one is good. I think most importantly is it's time for me to make sure that my leaders are able to take that next step, right? It's time for me to spend more time. I mean, I do a lot of development, But the greatest gift that I could give is helping develop them and getting them ready for the next promotion and beyond. And I really want to spend more time doing that. And I think and speaking to leaders to help them, right? Don't avoid all this muck that I went through. Or let me save you the trip of 20 years of learning here. But doing more speaking events, helping others to learn, and most importantly, helping my team succeed.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you obviously have a lot to share with the world. So, my last question for you is if you could go back in time and talk with yourself 15 years ago, what do you think would be the most important advice you could give that version of you?
I'm going to give you two. One is make sure to choose yourself and leave when you're in unhealthy environments. It's learning that it's okay to leave, right? Don't stay in that environment where it's going to do irreparable damage. So that's number one. And then two is by the time you recognize the cost of living in survival mode, it's too late. The body has already been impacted.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're at a point where you can really only stop. Maybe you can stop the growth, but in my case, the damage, so much of the damage was already done. And if I had known that at the time, I would have recognized that earlier and practiced much more self-care.
Absolutely. I think that probably resonates for all of us. Like, just freaking take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And it took
Thank
me,
you.
honestly, until I had a baby and went, I wouldn't want him doing this to himself. I wouldn't want him to live this way. So why is it okay for me?
Right.
Right? I need to love myself as much as I love my kids. And that was a big wake up call for me that I straight up did not love myself as much as I loved that child. And I think we all need to kind of stop and realize like love is something that you have to direct inward
Right.
and take care. And that shows everyone else too by example. Take care of yourself, right? Do the things you love. And it doesn't mean not to push hard. Like
Right. Right.
sometimes when you're being driven by passion, that's great. But
Mhm.
if you're being driven by fear and insecurity and trying to do things for other people,
Mhm.
then stop and check in. Right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, this has been so much fun. And I knew from our previous chats, right, that we had a lot of alignment around adversity. So it was really fun to hear your story. And thank you for sharing all the wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.